Good morning everyone and welcome to today's webinar, how to prepare your property for winter. You'll have to excuse me, I do have a little bit of a sore throat, so let me know if there's any difficulties with hearing me. We're going to do a quick intro and housekeeping just to let you know what's what. So on your right hand side of your screen you should be able to see a comments box where you can ask questions. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar itself, please raise them and we will get to them all at the end. If you are having difficulty hearing or seeing the slides themselves, please send me a quick message and we'll see what we can do to help. So I anticipate the webinar itself today being about half an hour in length. We'll go over a few things, but first of all, just to introduce myself. So I'm the Managing Director for MakeUrMove. We have been established for over 10 years. We were originally created by landlords for landlords, and we were set up to provide an alternative for landlords and tenants alike. We have a supportive role in place for landlords and tenants, so we are passionate about providing you with the correct technology for you to do what you need to do, but also making sure that you have access to supportive people to make sure that you have any answers to questions as they come up. Okay, so I think we had a bit of difficulty with the slides. Hopefully that's been sorted out now. So we're just going to go over what we're going to cover today onto the slides. So we're going to have a look at the common winter complaints that we receive from tenants and also probably yourselves, how you can prepare yourselves to deal with this, what information you should be giving to your tenants, what obligations you have for repairs, some top tips, and then we'll go through questions and answers at the end. So first of all, common winter complaints. At this time of year, you'll find that tenants start to use more of the heating. They'll start to notice as the temperatures drop, the cold. They'll also start to notice some things outside the property. So we've just sort of listed the basic ones that we get. Internally, the most common complaint we'll have is a faulty heating system. Now this could be boilers not working, radiators or heaters not working, pipes not heating up, water not heating up properly. So no hot water is the second one. You'll also get, as the heating starts to come on, more issues with condensation. There might be leaks that are noticed, and then damp as well, which is more prevalent at this time of year. Externally, some of the things to look out for that we get complaints on are leaking guttering, the roof, so leaks coming in through the roof, or slipped tiles, etc., especially as the winds pick up. Window units that might fail, so you may see condensation or water within the units themselves. And slippery paths is one that people tend to overlook, but warped gates is another one that you'll get at this time of year as well. So avoiding costly call-outs. Now, as landlords, you'll be aware that arranging routine maintenance is one cost, but dealing with emergency call-outs, so out of hours, over the Christmas period, over holidays, over bank holidays, evenings and weekends tend to be very expensive. Last year, nearly 1 in 5 homes had their boilers break down, which on average cost around £245 for landlords to have arranged for repairs. And there are early warning signs that your tenant might notice and that you can actually go and have a look for yourselves when you do inspections. So one is the boiler switching off by itself, the boiler not triggering once the thermostats reach a certain temperature, leaks, noises, whistling noises, water noises that are out of the ordinary, temperature of the water not getting up to the normal temperature, smell of gas, which obviously has its own risk factors, and you should be following standard procedures, which is calling your gas board to report those. The tips that we can offer for this is just to check when your boiler was last serviced. Consider taking out a specific landlord boiler cover, which will, prevent these unexpected costs from coming in. So you may pay a monthly cost for these covers. You can factor it into your ongoing costs. It is deductible. You can then make sure that you have emergency cover should it be required, which should just reduce the unexpectedness of some of these costs, and then visit the property and have a chat with the tenant. If you're unable to visit the property yourself to speak to the tenant about these things, just popping over a quick friendly email to say, what's going on, and is everything in place? Is everything all right? Is there any alerts, etc.? Should be enough. Now, on that basis, the biggest one we have is that being forewarned is forearmed. So if you know about these things in advance, you can do something. If you understand the potential risks of things, you can make sure that you're prepared to deal with it. So first of all, arrange a visit. If you can't arrange a visit, then just have a friendly chat with your tenant and discuss anything that they may have noticed. You can also potentially instruct someone to go out to the property and do exactly the same thing. So just list some observations, take photos, find out from a tenant if anything is untoward or anything that they've noticed, and make sure it's in a report so that you can then deal with it. Whilst you're there or following that inspection, just advise them on best practices. So best practices for dealing with bringing the heating on, if there is any issues with the pressure on the boiler, making sure that they consider the radiator if it's not getting to temperature or there's cold spots in it, maybe having a look at bleeding these radiators. Just all little advice that you can give to tenants that will prevent them from taking the easy option of just phoning you. Check how things are in the Christmas run-up so that you can avoid further out-of-hours call-outs. This could be as simple as just sending them a quick message. How are things going? Are there any issues that I should be aware of? Otherwise, enjoy your Christmas. Check that they have any emergency numbers over the Christmas and winter period. Now, bear in mind that it's not pre-Christmas that tends to have most of these issues. It's actually the period between Christmas and New Year and early January that we get the most of these complaints. If you have protection in place, make sure you pass these details on to your tenant. Sometimes some of these organisations, insurance policies, warranties will take calls directly from tenants, and they can actually provide tenants with advice over the phone or arrange to come out to the property directly. Just make sure they understand what is or isn't considered a claim to a policy like this. So we're going to have a quick look at heating and hot water. Obviously, you all need to make sure your gas safety certificate is up to date. It is advisable to have regular boiler servicing every year. If it's been a while since you had your boiler service, now would be a good time to get that booked in. You just give it a clean through, make sure everything's in place and check for any issues. Ensure your tenant is familiar with how they use the heating system, and this includes thermostats. So if there is a time settings that they can put in place, how the heating should come on. If it's storage heaters, make sure they understand that when they switch the storage heater on, it's not going to heat up straight away, and then it may take 10 hours or so to heat up fully, and then it will heat up overnight. So what we found, one of our complaints last year was that somebody was complaining about the storage heaters. When we discovered what was happening is they were switching them off when they went out to work in the morning, switching them on at 6 o'clock when they got in from work, and then were complaining that the heaters weren't on, but the heaters themselves were actually coming on whilst they were at work because they were doing the storage overnight. So it's making sure they understand exactly how those heating systems work. If you have manuals, provide them with manuals, especially when it comes to regular maintenance or how to do sort of DIY maintenance. And what I mean by that is if you can notice the pressure is down, how they repressurize that boiler, etc., how to bleed radiators, even going as far as to provide them with a specific key for the radiators, and just showing them how it's done. And then check your smoke alarms, which is just a standard procedure. At this time of year, it's always worthwhile doing. If you know your tenants are going away over the Christmas period, just make sure that they inform you if they're going to be away for a longer period of time. This is more for security than anything else, but also set the boilers to frost settings so that the pipes don't freeze. One of the other checks that we would recommend you do at this time of year is check your lagging too, so make sure that all your pipes are protected. Condensation and leaks. So this time of year, you switch your heating on. It causes heat to build up in a room. Windows obviously aren't being opened. Potentially you could be drying clothes inside as well. All of that will lead to additional condensation that they're not used to, and it will make people panic. So we do get a lot of complaints from tenants saying that a property has got damp, but actually it turns out it's just condensation. You will particularly get this on outside cold surfaces. So you will get it on your windows, for example, and it may look like there's an issue, and actually there isn't. It is just you need a little bit of ventilation. But one of the things you can do to make sure that you're on top of it is just check that all the extractor fans are in working order. Check for any damp patches. Do your own investigation on those damp patches. You know, wipe them down. Does it look like they will go away? Is it just a one-off? Is it an ongoing problem? Have a conversation with your tenant about ventilating the property, especially whilst drying clothes inside, and then do a quick health check on your pipe work. So is it all in good working order? The connections are working fine? The external pipes are protected for frost, etc. Roofs and guttering. So the second most common complaint that we have at this time of year and going into the new year is the roof. So right now I think we've been lucky. November's not been as cold as we would expect it to be. There hasn't been as much wet weather that there normally is as well. Last year, I believe we did have quite severe wet weather, and we did get a lot of complaints. Slipped tiles on roofs, flashing that wasn't correct, etc., fascias that had been misplaced, which would then lead to a little leak. The problem with small leaks in roofs is more the timber within the frame itself, but also the escape of water into the rooms below. So sometimes you can get issues with like the downstairs rooms, and it's not completely apparent where that's coming from. We find that it's normally from a guttering or downpipe or from the roof itself. So just have a quick look from ground level. We don't want you going up there and using huge ladders and things like that, but you should be able to see your roof from the ground level. Check if there are any tiles that look loose, slates that look loose, signs of any damage to the chimney or blockages. So you may get birds making nests within your chimneys, so you might get signs of foliage hanging out of your chimney. These can also have an impact on the internal condition of the property. Check your flashing and fascias are all in place. And then with your guttering, just advise your tenant, and it is a tenant's responsibility to clear out the leaves. However, you may find that if you can go and see it, then you can point it out to them. Check the joints of your guttering. At this time of year, you can sometimes get some cracks in there, which cause the water to run down the wall rather than going to the flow down pipe. And then check that all the water is flowing to an exit point and that the drains are clear. And this will just prevent you from getting further issues. Paths, driveways and security. This is probably the most overlooked part of preparing for winter. So it's easy to say tenants are in the property and it's their responsibility to ensure that the paths are clear of weeds, moss, that the garden isn't overgrown, that hedges aren't overgrown. And at this time of year, when it starts to get dark and it starts to freeze, you will have issues with paths, but you also have issues with fencing and gates and doors to a certain extent as well. And the biggest concern that you should have as a landlord is the security element of these things. So one of the things to do is when you're at the inspection is just check that all paths, exits are hazard free. So there's no cracks in the paving, that the paving is relatively clear, that if there are any issues with moss or weeding, you point it out to your tenant. Just recommend they get it done because it can have a huge impact on when the weather drops, being able to get in and out of your property safely. If you have a security alarm installed, check that it's working and that your tenant knows how to use it. So one of the things here is if you have a remote security system, is ensure that all the details are up to date, that the codes are up to date, and that the security company that you have managing that system is aware of the tenant in place and that they've got the right contact details. One example, we've had alarms going off and then an old tenant from previously 2 or 3 years prior being called to check whether or not the property is safe so that they can disable the alarm. So just make sure that you've got all of your details up to date with that. Check safety lights, and this is a big one at this time of year. So if you have safety lights, great. They tend to put off people from trying to break into properties or break into outbuildings such as sheds. But if they're not working, it kind of defeats the object. So just check them. It is your tenant's responsibility to change those bulbs. But if you can just have a quick look and then recommend it to them, you're sort of doing them a favour. And then remind tenants to make sure that windows and doors are locked for security, whether they're in or out. Is one of the things that we say. There have been instances in the past where tenants have been in the properties when somebody has come into the property through an open door and helped themselves to car keys, helped themselves to money on the side. So just give them a quick reminder to make sure that everything is locked and secure at this time of year. And then hopefully you won't be getting a call on Christmas Eve complaining that somebody's been into the property and having to deal with lock changes, etc. So your obligations. Now this is quite a tricky one because obviously you have a certain amount of obligations as far as health and safety goes. You have to make sure that fixtures, fittings and any appliances that you provide meet the current safety standards. So gas safety, electrical safety, fixtures and fittings aren't going to cause some sort of health hazard or safety hazard to the occupiers or visitors of the property. You do have an obligation to take action as soon as you become aware of any maintenance issue. So the best practice is to consider what you would do if you live there and also have some sort of a ranking system in place. So if you get a call about a maintenance issue, then decide whether or not there is an immediate requirement to get that fixed. If it can be fixed during routine maintenance, can you arrange for somebody to go out on the next available working day, for example? Is the facility that provides completely not working? For example, if it's a boiler issue, is there no heating and no hot water completely? And then you have to have a look at whether or not there is any at-risk tenants or occupiers of the property. So if there are children, if there are elderly people, if there are people with health conditions, they're all considered at risk, and it is important that you get those utilities back in place as soon as possible. Here we have what we call a 24-hour and an A&E service over the phone. So if a tenant calls us, we have a series of steps that we can go through with tenants to just recommend to them something that they can do at the property themselves. So it could be about the electrics. If the electrics go, we'll go through a series of steps with them to help them determine what is causing that electric drop out. Sometimes it's a fuse, sometimes it's an appliance that's overloaded the system. You will have certain circuits now that are in place for protection, which will shut down the whole system as a result of one appliance. There are a number of methods you can do. Ultimately, if we're unable to fix it, the view is then, do we need to get somebody out there as an emergency, as in now, or can we wait until the next working day to get somebody out? And bear in mind that over this time of year, contractors to do with gas safety, heating and plumbing will be very busy and difficult to get hold of. The other thing to do is keep a spare key. Make sure you or your agent or somebody local to the property that you can trust has a spare key for emergency access, or if you need to get into the property but the tenants aren't able to provide you with access. And just remember that you must get permission to access the property. You do have a right to enter the property if you feel there is an emergency, such as flooding to the property, or if there is an electrical risk or a safety risk to other people. And you can access that, but you need to make sure that you understand those obligations. So our summary and top tips. We've gone through a few of these already, but make sure your tenant knows how and when to report issues. If you're not going to be here over the Christmas period, do they have someone else that they can reach out to if there are any main concerns? Make sure they have those contact numbers. Get any cover or protection in place and check any warranties that you have before the Christmas period, and make sure your tenants have a record of those details. Keep a record of trusted contractors for all trades. So if you've used a contractor before and you're happy with them, just keep a record of them, keep them in your mobile, wherever you find it convenient, and make sure that you can reach out to them if there is an issue over the Christmas period and thereafter. Make sure you have a spare key available in case of an emergency. As I said, this could be held with a local agent, yourself, or a contact nearby that you're happy to hold it with. Another method that we get with some of our landlords is they install key safes in a discrete location at the property, and the keys are held in there, and then they can issue to any contractors that they instruct the relevant codes to access it to get the keys. If you can, visit the property yourself in person or instruct someone else to go to the property just to do a quick inspection for the winter check. Whilst you're there, you can also do an overall condition inspection, and that might save you a job in a month or two's time if you do those regularly. Provide your tenant with a guide and any warranty documents or manuals related to appliances such as the boiler or fire or heating system. The guide we would recommend is something that sort of assists tenants with the immediate issue of maintenance should they report something with heating. So we can put a guide, we have a guide that we'll send to you after this webinar. Within that guide, it points out to tenants how best to deal with bleeding a system. It isn't just a case of simply just going around and bleeding every radiator. There are little troubleshooting methods you can take to turn all the radiators off and then turn them on one by one, and that will force the water through the system. You'll be able to then tell whether or not there is something that's not heating up. But if you do this normally, you will get every radiator working again. If it doesn't work, that would normally lend itself to an issue. Knowing how to repressurize the boiler if the pressure drops below a certain gauge. All of these little hints and tips can save you a phone call if you provide that to the tenant with a guide. And then if you're not local or you don't have the ability to take these calls randomly at any time, then use an accredited agent who will manage that for you. That most of them take calls that you as a landlord won't even be made aware of, but they will do it regularly. Here we have a 24-hour emergency helpline, but we also deal with calls internally as well within the main office. So it just gives you a little bit of reassurance that your tenant has someone to reach out to and you're not going to be responsible for it. Next, we're going to go, you'll send out a video of these and the slides, but we will also send you a quick tenant guide, which sort of gives you some pointers to hand over to your tenant so that you can just troubleshoot some of the issues, but also raise awareness of some of these problems. We would like to invite you to our next webinar just in a few weeks' time, which is going to cover the tenant fee ban. So the tenant fee ban is making its way through the House of Lords, and it has gone past with no amendments. So it's now on to its third and final reading, which is set for early December. And we're going to just discuss with our landlords what that means for them. So please do sign up for the next one, which is on Thursday, the 13th of December at 11. Here's a quick look at our winter property checklist guide, which we'll send over. And now I'd like to invite you for any questions that you may have. I don't think so. We did have a question regarding the security system. I kind of touched on that, but just to reiterate and make sure that I have answered it properly. If you have a security system that is managed by an external provider, just make sure that those details are updated, that they have the correct contact information so they're not calling one of your old tenants if the alarm goes off, but also ensure that they know how to use it. Security systems are important and useful, but only if people can use them. Okay, so it's a nice, quite short one this time. If you do have any questions that you're not able to ask right now, do feel free to follow up with us. You can reach out to us on email, phone, or just visit the website, which has a wealth of information for you in our blog section. And if that's it, we thank you for attending the webinar and look forward to seeing you at the next one. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you.